So just pull that through a little bit, and then what I want to do is kind of go around my bale to about where I'm going to cut it, so I can get, you know, enough but not too much. Tricky there. Then I'm going to cut that. My extra sharp knife. I'm going to do the same down here. And the reason you know, you could do one needle and tie it and then stick it through, but if you got two needles, you're doing all these things at the same time instead of doing them twice on each bale. So essentially, once those are in, just hooked in like that, I'm going to pull that string through, take it out, pull this one through, now I've got that sewn through the bale, and then I want to keep my new strings right in line with my old strings because that's where they're the tightest. So I'll just kind of pull that there, pull that there. See how they're following it? Then I'll flip this, and now I'll line these up. And then what I'll tie here, you just take a loop like that, and you kind of bring this back through a loop. Now I don't know the fancy knot term for this knot.
A loop knot.
We call this the hillbilly slip knot. But the key is, once you tie it, you've got a loop that won't close on you. So I'm going to tie two of those. So once I said, very high-tech, complicated process here we got going on. All right. So you got these two. Now we're going to bring this string through this, like so, on both of these. Now, I like to line them up if I can, so I kind of pull that around. And then, what I like to do is I put the needle back in, to kind of, as I pull on this, to keep it from just spinning around the bale, to kind of hold this in place. Now, I can pull on that. Now, I like to use, you could use a piece of stick, you could use a piece of bamboo or whatever, a tool, but I like to use this because one, I can pull this tighter with some leverage here. Two, at the end of the day, my fingers aren't looking like I'm 100 years old from pulling on the string. So now, as I pull on this, I got good leverage here. I'll put my knee here, keep this down, and I'll kind of pull this tight, and I'll usually jerk it because I can get a little more strength out of it. Then once I get it as tight as I think I can get it without breaking the string, I'll squeeze this, hold it from, you know, keep it at its tightness, and then essentially we'll do a couple half hitches. So essentially it's just a loop on the string and then back through that. Now the key here is to keep holding this tight. And instead of letting this go right now, which when it did tighten I'd lose an inch, I'll actually jerk this string away from that. So it'll actually make it super tight. So when I cut my bale, I don't end up with a really loose bale. And then I'll just do another one of those to back up that knot. See, I'm kind of jerking that in. Same thing here. And like I said, it's important that you stay in line with your string. If you get over here where it's not in tension, it's not going to make a very tight bale. So once again, I'll keep that tight with this. Because see, if I pulled that out, this thing just slides around on me. So you want to use that needle to hold it in place. Okay. And I'll put my knee here so I can just get use my body naturally to try to use it. Because in construction, I mean, I always tell my guys, and I try to teach people, use your mind and leverage and all the principles of physics and stuff to help you get your job done instead of your back and arms and legs and stuff, because it's so much easier to try to do that than end up doing it all physically. So once again, I pinch that, a couple half hitches, keep it pinched as you kind of jerk it tight, make sure it's really tight. Do another half hitch, and then I'll usually cut this excess out of the way, so it's just leave an inch or two on the string. One, if you're going on edge, the strings are exposed, so you don't want a loose piece there that's going to get caught in your weed eater and send you to the ground or something, or to the hospital. So now we pull these out, and we are ready. Now a lot of people ask me, well, how come you don't cut, resize another bale out of this? And you can. Like if I was doing two, like 15-inch bales, I could do one here and cut one string and get two bales out of it. Obviously we've got a bad end here, and this is kind of not even either. It's not really squared, it's a little off. We got some stuff in there. So we're just gonna pull this off, and we'll use that for flakes or stuffing, and the green stuff wants to go in the green stuff pile so that we don't integrate that into the building. Now as I cut this, you'll see my string is not near as tight as his because I can't mechanically do it, but I got it pretty tight. As I cut this, you'll see that it'll fill that out and make that a little tighter than it was when boom, falls right off. Then you kind of come in where your string goes, and see how it'll just flake right off on you? Now, I just saw it, now I'm seeing some moisture in here I didn't see before. So that's important to really, that's what I said, you want to really look for, you don't see a lot of coloration there, but there's some moisture that's gotten in there. So I might want to pull this out and see how far that goes in. And if it goes, see, actually I'm still pulling off to my string.
Right now in the sunshine.
Then I pull my old strings out of the way. And I usually save these. So like I could tie like a 12-inch bale with this real easy, or a smaller bale. I could easily reuse these. Recycle, reuse, the old adage. So I pulled that out, now it doesn't look too bad. So this, if I can pull that out and I get past the wet or the green or the whatever, then I feel confident using that bale. So that's how you resize a bale. That punched out about 5 more inches. Huh? This is. And so when we retie a bale, which I'll do in a minute, it'll kind of follow these same principles. You just saw it grew like 2 inches with just one string. So that it's in compression on a tight bale, which is what you want. It's in such compression that what's going to settle? It's wanting to grow all the time. It's wanting to grow if it can. So once you weight that down with all the other bales, and you get it protected and connected on the outside with your stucco and lath or whatever you're using out there, that thing isn't going anywhere. It's not going to settle or compress. So now we pull this open and you can see, well, it got wet on this side for sure, here and here. You could use some of this bale probably for stuffing or doing flakes. Any areas, as we stack the bales together, we'll kind of stuff some loose straw in those connections to make sure we don't have any thermal weak spots. But that is definitely, you do not want that in your wall or in your house. This would be better off on the garden like that, or landscape. And you can smell it. You probably guys could probably smell it when I cut that open, start pulling it apart. You can smell the mold and the stuff happening there. So that's, like I said, moisture is your number one enemy, and the number one thing you want to look at always to protect the weak spots, the connections between bale and foundation, and bale and roof, and bale and window, and those kinds of aspects, because that's where it's going to get in on you usually. So this is what's called a flake. Now if you see how this bale comes apart, it'll kind of come apart in sections. And we'll call those flakes. Let me just get rid of the moldy part here. So these flakes are great. We'll set these aside and we'll use these where we need to stuff in between an area. Once you get below 9 or 10 inches, it's really hard to retie a bale that small. And it's such a small area that we would just take 9 or 10 inches of flake. It's still in good compression. And if we had a bale here and there, we would put that down in there and make sure it goes in good and tight. And so we would use these, what we call flakes. And you can see how they naturally kind of separate into these sections. And that's because of how the baler picks up the hay and starts grabbing it, and then puts it all together into one bale. Stacked here. And I usually like to put the cut side to the outside. And that's because when we trim it up, it's just a coarser, stronger bond. And the engineering code tests they've done have shown that it's pretty strong if you trim that up. So, I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to show you guys a couple ways to trim this. We were using the weed eater yesterday. So this is your ordinary weed eater. I found that the Ryobi has been the best one for holding up over time. You know, we're using these things all the time.
Why? Is there a difference between this side and the other side? One's the cut side?
This is cut side, and you can see the ridges, and it's very coarse and dense. The other side, it's not cut, it's just packed against. So what happens is the baler pulls it in, packs it against one end, and cuts that to, or shapes that into size as it's going into the feeder, and then bales it. So I like this on the inside, and I like the cut on the outside because of its strength and basically, you know, the stucco bonding to it better, especially if you spray it in. So what I want to do is want to trim off so that we kind of get down to this flat, coarse area of that. Now the key here is, once again, to have a slight angle, not exactly flat, but not on edge, so you don't chew up the bale too much. So it takes it down pretty good. The coarse side's a little harder to cut than like the flat or the pack side. That'll trim up real easy, as you guys noticed yesterday. This is used a lot. You see those cute little chainsaw carved bears?
Oh yeah.
That's what these guys do all the fine carving with. After they do the chainsaw, take the chainsaw and make the main shape, and then they do all the intricate carving with this. Log guys use them a lot, so they're a pretty new tool. They've been out a couple years. But they've become very popular with straw bale builders. And they actually market this tool to them in some of the trade magazines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the way this will trim up a little tighter, and I can do some nichos. I'm going to show you guys how to do like a little nicho cutout, because that's one of the beauties of straw bales. Everything's so carvable and shapeable that we can put little holes, and if anyone doesn't know what a nicho is, it's basically a little carved hole within the wall, and it comes from the Spanish tradition. I believe the word nicho is Spanish. So I'm going to trim this up, and I'm going to carve a little nicho in here just to show you guys how to do that. Now the same thing, this blade, you want to kind of hold it with just a slight angle and hold on tight. So you can see how much straighter I was able to trim that than with the weed whacker. So what a lot of times we do is we'll weed whack the wall first to get most all the really loose straw off, and then anywhere where I've got a lump or a bump, or I want to, you know, put a nicho, I'm going to come back and trim up with this thing here. Now I'm going to take the chainsaw, which is our third fancy straw bale tool. Now let's say, we want to just cut a little nicho in here, and our strands are running this way with this bale. So what I like to do, if I cut straight in, I'm just cutting with the strands. So I'm going to do a little angle cut, and then once I get that angle cut in place, I'm going to take the lancelot and get in that nicho hole and kind of clean it up a little bit. So here's my area I want to do my nicho in. Start up the saw, and I'm going to go in. Then I'm going to come over here. And I'm kind of doing what's called a plunge cut. So I'm kind of carefully plunging in. Once you get it in there, it won't move. It's that being really steady when you first make your cut. Okay, so now I've got that cut. I'm going to pull out the bulk of what I cut, just get the loose stuff out of the way. Then I can come back in there, if I keep this thing plugged in. Then come back in. Now I'm going to get in that hole and clean it up a little bit with the old Sir Lancelot. Okay, so we can of course keep trimming that, and the beauty of straw bales, you can make that whatever shape you want. I've seen people build reliefs. I know a guy that did a home where he took a tree, and he took this tree and pinned it to the bale wall, and then he actually plastered over it so that the tree showed up in the plaster. So you had this plastered wall, and then you had this tree relief coming out of it, just going all up the wall. Very beautiful. Here we'll all pack down once we get all this weight standing up there. So we're going to kind of go from 1.5 inches to nothing. And always remember, as you cut with the chain, you don't want to cut straight, because the straw is so strong it will deflect it out. So you want to cut and always keep an angle down on the bale. It doesn't go with normal carpentry sense, but if not, it'll deflect out and you'll lose it. So you want to keep it at an angle. And I'll lift out every now and then, just see how I'm looking. See, I jumped a little there, but I think I'm getting the right angle there. Because once you cut a bale, and I want to come back and cut a little more off this, it's really hard, because when you're in here it'll cut through, but when you're on the edge it wants to deflect. So sometimes you have to come back aggressive. I deflected a little. So put another one of these in. Now, see, it looks like we're a little in here now, so I still think we need to trim it a little bit. We're going to end up with a bulge. I think we should pull it out and over trim it. We can always stuff that a little bit. Now, one of the reasons we're trimming this because we use logs, and the fat end, the wider end of the log goes at the bottom and it tapers up. I have my lath connections, and then if we say this is up 3 or 4 rows, then at this point we're going to want to stabilize our wall with some pinning. And we use bamboo. It's just renewable, it's cheap, it's easy to work with. A lot of people use rebar, and everyone's trying to kind of minimize using rebar because of the expense and the difficulty in working with it and how much energy goes into making it. So if we had 3 rows high, then I would just get this started in the center, and it's important that it's not going at an angle. We saw yesterday what can happen. It'll just come poking out of the wall and poke someone in the backside if they're not careful. So we want this nice and straight. And then we're going to take the driver and our little sledge, and we just get up here. And this, like I said, this was just an automotive tool I had left over from my old mechanic days. I've had them made, and this thing has just held up the best. Basically get it up on there and just pound this down till it stops. I'm not going to pound it all the way in, but I'm just trying to show you guys it's important that it stays straight and goes down. And also, this is 3/4 bamboo, which is little less likely to bend than, say, 1/2 inch or something. So we try to use the thicker stuff. And so you get your wall pin. You've got usually at least 2 pins per bale. So you'd have one here. You'd have one going in this side. How to do that. First, I'm going to make a rebar staple, and we just use one of these benders here. So what I like to do is, I almost need an assistant for this part of the program, but you want it to be about 1 foot, and it's going to start your bend about there and come back. So you want to be about, and kind of leave that angle in. And then you want to just kind of have 3 pieces be about the same and concentric of that. Hang on. Okay. Now leave your angle in there, and I'm just going to cut this little piece off. Go all the way up. Okay. Voila, rebar staple. Yep. And like I said, it's important to leave this so as you drive it down, it just pulls tighter and tighter and tighter and compresses that corner wall in there really good. So we've kind of talked about some different pinning techniques with load bearing or post and beam infill. These are our blood lath strips. And what we want to do is bend these in half, or even it could be a third to 2/3. And then this will be something that, you know, we can do. You can just do it as we go. We got a bunch cut up, but we'll probably have to make some more. We'll set up a station, and you can either cut them with these snips.
You want them to be?
How wide or
How much?
how long? Well, the main thing is you want to get a good pin. You want to get a good pin into the bale. You don't need much. I mean, it could be like this actually,
Okay.
because we're going to use a pneumatic stapler, and we're going to staple it right in this corner to hold it as tight as possible. And you don't need much more than that. What you really need is as much possible in the bale, so you can put a couple of these pins in and secure the two. Now you're securing the bale to the wood. There's other methods of doing it. Some people tie stuff on, tie it together, whatever.